On today's program and featured in Center Ring, we have Dr. Loretta Billoups. Dr. Billoups has quite a resume. She is a forensic psychologist. She has her doctorate in applied clinical psychology. She used to be part of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That's the most fun part. I love that. I love law enforcement. Only when they give me a break, Dr. Billoups.
Understood.
And as you know, a clinician and a transformational coach. So Dr. Billoups, thank you for taking time out of your enormously busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, my pleasure, because the two topics we're going to discuss, I think, are going to be very interesting to everybody.
Right.
The first one I wanted to discuss with you,
Mm-hmm.
how childhood experiences affect our adult relationships.
Mm.
They do. I would like you to discuss how and why they do, and then how does this come to play in a divorce as people are dealing with each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a heavy topic to start on. But let's get through it. So when you think about your childhood, we have our first loves, right? Which are our caregivers, mom and dad. And we look at them for guidance. We also are very observant in how they interact with each other, and we start to pick up on that. As we grow up and reach maturity and in adulthood, oftentimes what we witnessed or observed in our childhood, how our parents communicated with each other, how our parents interact with each other, how we receive love or didn't receive love, that is what we bring into our relationships, right? Whether it's a relationship with your partner or even a relationship with your children. It's again, those our first loves, our caregivers, is how we continue to process or communicate throughout our adult lives.
All right. So here's what I find happens in when people come to my office, either for mediation or to file.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody says why the divorce is happening, and it's a no-fault divorce state in California, as it is now in most states in the country. You don't have to prove grounds why you're getting divorced. But somehow it comes up, or issues come up. He or she isn't responsive. He or she has anger issues. He or she,
Mm-hmm.
so it's the negative part of our personalities that come out. And because I have a lot of therapists, colleagues, and friends who have taught me little things along the way, I don't practice therapy, but I at least have the ability to ask a trigger question that will all of a sudden put everything in perspective with the person I'm speaking with. And all I have to say is, are your spouse's parents still alive? And if even one of them is still alive, I said, do you know anything about the relationship your spouse had with his or her parents? And all of a sudden the light goes on.
Right.
They get it.
Absolutely.
We
Yes.
we repeat, right?
Absolutely, we do. I mean, I could share a story with you about my current marriage. Love my husband dearly. Um, but I would say that growing up, his parents lacked affection. Um, he would probably tell you that he never saw them, hug or do anything, to make you think like, hey, they love each other. And I remember the first time I met his parents, I went in to go give his mother a hug and she was stiff and I couldn't understand. And then I went to go give his father a hug and it was kind of like a little pat. And this
Right.
is before I knew anything. And so as we continue to date, of course, I'm noticing these same things with him. Wasn't very affectionate, really wasn't a hand holding type. And then that's when the conversations start to happen like, hey, how come you're not affectionate? And then I remembered, oh, that first time I gave them a hug. And then I started asking questions about that. Well, what was your childhood like? Did your mother tell you she loves you? And, without going into details, um, yeah, it wasn't a lot of affection growing up, specifically by his mother. And so we had to do a lot of work around affection and what that looks like in this relationship, so that it could survive, because I was and still is the complete opposite. I grew up with a lot of affection, solely from my mom because my father wasn't in the picture, but my mother gave me more than what I needed. And so I'm able to pass that on to my children. And then again with my husband, again, we had to learn together, you know.
Right.
Hmm.
So what should people do now once the light goes on
Hmm.
and the behavior that one spouse doesn't like of the other spouse or is troubled by it, something like that? If there is a divorce that's happening, because this is all about amicable divorce, what should that person do now that they're starting to understand where the behavior came from that they might find slightly aberrant or unacceptable?
Well, I would think it first starts off with, like you said, once that light bulb come on, being understanding and being compassionate. That's where I had to start, because I was like, well, how can I expect this man to give me something that he's never had? So that was the first thing. I had to take a step back. And then once I understood that, then it was a conversation, because I wanted my needs met as well. Just because you didn't have these amazing, what I think are amazing things in your life, that doesn't mean I should go without. But I want you to understand that I am compassionate about your situation. So then a conversation ensued. You know, um, I like to be hugged. I like for you to hold me at night. And thankfully he was receptive. It didn't happen overnight. Let's just be clear. But it was just those constant reminders that this is what I would like out of the relationship, but still giving him his space and giving him an opportunity to grow. And that goes for any relationship. First, understand the parallels that your spouse has been through. Have those conversations, and then start communicating your needs. And hopefully, they'll get on board and want to work with you in order for both of you to be happy, because you're going to meet each other halfway.
Did he ever question the effect? Is your mother still living? Let me ask that.
My mother's still living.
Okay. Did he ever question the amount of affection he saw between both of you when you first introduced him to your family?
Not between my mother and I, but I already had two children prior to our relationship. And he definitely would, like, why are you guys always hugging? You just saw them. So he would,
Adorable.
yeah. So
Yeah.
because I'm always hugging and kissing my children. And I would like to say that he's come a long way, because we have a son together, and he is super affectionate to our son.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really, really great. The very first thing you said, which I liked and which I think is helpful, is, well, the first thing you have to do is be empathetic, understanding.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest issues when people are getting divorced, before it's completely smooth and amicable, because it can get to that point, it
Right.
can,
Right.
blame. Blame sets in. And I think, and I'd like you to address this. Who cares what I think? You're the psychologist. You're in center ring today. Um, so the blame has to stop or you can't move forward. You're sick. So let's address this. When people are in the blame cycle, once they receive information that can maybe clarify one or two of the issues that they're blaming their soon to be former spouse with, how do they get out of the blame cycle?
That's a good question, because oftentimes they're in the blame cycle for so long, they actually believe, what I refer to like our delusions. Um, Again, it comes back down to communication and really wanting to change. If you're in a relationship with someone and they don't recognize that they're doing anything wrong, or they're causing any sort of disruption in the relationship, it's going to be really difficult to navigate through that. The person needs to has to want to make changes within themselves. And then when you have someone constantly blaming you for something, clearly they need to look at themselves. because something is wrong there, right? What is that saying? Like you point a finger at someone else and then how many are pointing back to you type of thing. I know it sounds
Mhm.
kind of childish, but it's the truth, right?
Right.
You're putting this on someone else, and really the situation is you. So hopefully they have an open mind. Hopefully they're receptive to the information that's coming, and hopefully they want to change. And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what therapy and coaches are for.
Well, hold on. What if the issue bothering one of the spouses doesn't bother the other spouse?
So, I'm trying to think, have I ever had that in one of my sessions? I Actually, I have, and I really think that we all have deal breakers, right? There's always things that are in our relationship that what may work for you may not work for me or vice versa, right? So
Mhm.
if it's not troublesome in your relationship and you're still able to navigate the relationship, and nothing is coming up where that dreaded D word, as we talked about earlier, comes up,
Mhm.
go
Oh
for it.
no, I'm talking about the divorce has been discussed. It's going to
Hmm.
be filed for. It's maybe being filed for right now.
Hmm.
And as they engage professionals to help them, you can see that the blame game is in full force.
Oh.
And as a mediator, when people come in to mediate,
Hmm.
the blaming can take up most of the time in the mediation. And you can't really, as a mediator, stop them. We all try, but sometimes they control the room and they're so engaged with one another, blaming each other. It's just, you either have to sit back and let it play itself out or just say,
Right,
maybe we should just adjourn because we're not getting anywhere. And
right.
so I always think about how can they get out of the cycle of blame? Because they'll each have their own blame for each other. And it may be very real to them, but not real to each other. They're not accepting what the other spouse is saying as a reason to feel responsible for making the other spouse miserable.
Right. Yeah, I think, like you said, sometimes, you get in the rut of blaming each other and no one can see eye to eye. So in that situation, I think in time it works itself out. And the reason why I say that is because if are in the process of getting divorced and that individual that they're blaming, now they're no longer in their space, right? And so what
Mm.
happens is like, okay, now I'm in another relationship and it's the same pattern. Okay. Now my friends are saying something. Well, maybe my wife was right, right? Because I'm going to be me all day long, right? No
Yeah.
matter who I'm presenting in front of, whether it's a spouse, a friend, or whatever have you, I'm going to be me. And so the common denominator is me. And after enough times, I would hope and I would think that these conversations are going to keep coming up and you're going to recognize that, hey, maybe I'm to be at fault and I need to start working on myself.
I did interview someone in Greece, a woman in Greece who was married with her own small child, and she wrote a book about parental alienation.
Mm,
It obviously came from her own experience as a child with parental alienation. And she said, I mean, she was just an adolescent when it happened. She's
yeah.
now in her 30s with a child, married herself. Her mother still blames her father for the divorce.
Wow.
And so I guess there are just those situations where if you're not willing to advance your own head, your own heart, your own psyche,
Yeah,
I guess that really is at the root of it. Are we willing to move forward and
abs-
release those emotions from the past?
absolutely. Because when you think about it, I mean, I don't know how old her mother is, but if she's in her 30s, I could probably guesstimate. I mean, doesn't that sound miserable? Doesn't that sound like just a vicious cycle that for years and years you're still blaming this individual? Um, and it sounds like we need to do some work about forgiveness, right? Like let it go and move on because it's just a heavy burden to carry. And it's really sad that she's caught up in a rut. But yeah, some people, the bottom line is some people you just can't help because they're not ready to move on. They don't want to move on, and they've come to normalize this experience.
They have, but the an important part on this is what you're doing to your children. So
Mm-hmm.
that blame, that inability not to release those negative feelings and say, you know what, it's not a crime that we're getting divorced. It's not a crime that you committed adultery. I mean, it is what it is. It hurt me,
Right.
whatever the case may be. But it's really the children that then go into extreme therapy, have relationship issues, right?
Yes, absolutely. Um, I think it's so important that children see that, okay, mom and dad may be getting a divorce, but they're doing it kindly. They're keeping us at the forefront of their minds and the decisions that they're making. Maybe we have a say so, maybe we participate. They're still friends. They still love each other. It's so important that the children see them because, what is it, about 50% of our population are going through divorce, and some of those are
Mhm.
just horrendous. And you need to pay attention that your children are watching this and they too are going to be traumatized by what they're witnessing with the parents. So again, the divorce is already traumatic, right? Because
Yeah.
everything you've known is now changing. Maybe address is changing, maybe schools have to change. There's so many things. And children are very sensitive. So why not, let's just see if we can do this where it's amicable, peaceful, and the children are being held at the forefront of our minds so that they could have an opportunity to heal themselves.
A- Absolutely. My heart always goes out to parents who are in a very emotional way when they're starting the divorce process, and then they have to co-parent. I'm like, oh my God, could there be a harder situation for anybody to think of that old phrase, best interest of the child? Well, my heart is like not even in my body. It's on the floor.
Mhm.
How do people do this, Dr. Billups?
It's difficult and it takes a lot of communication and it takes you want to humble yourselves and maybe for a minute you'll have to be selfless and the children must come first because at the end of the day when you bring children into this world um, they have nothing to do with what's going on and sometimes parents are really they're so angry at the other party that they involve the other children. This is not their fight, right? You just want them to be safe and for them to be able to live their best lives while you guys are navigating this.
They don't need to know the reason for the divorce. They don't need
Mhm.
to know what you're going through personally,
No,
which is hard, but
yeah,
compartmentalizing is,
yeah, yeah. I think in terms of the reason for the divorce, I think it depends on the age. Because if you're a teenager, and maybe you're very sensible and very in tune, and depending on what the reason is, parents might feel comfortable sharing that with the an age appropriate child. But of course, our younger children below the age of adolescence, they don't necessarily need to know the reason. They just need to know that mom and dad loves them, and mom and dad are going to be there for them regardless of what's going on between mom and dad.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Just a quick question. I don't think you're expecting this, but when you were with the police department, did you ever in any of your levels have to deal with domestic violence, get called out on those types of?
I did not have to deal with that. I got them on the back end. I got them after they were arrested because most of my career was in the jail or in courts. So
Mm,
I would see them, um, like I said, after the situation, or I would see them in court.
okay.
Yeah,
I just wondered what it was like going to people's homes and if there were children there, how you dealt with it. It's so volatile at that point. If
exactly.
the police are being called, it's pretty volatile.
Right. And I will tell you, based on many conversation with partners who had to deal with those type of calls, they would tell you that those are the one of the most dangerous calls you ever get. Because what happens is you have two people who are upset with each other, and then the police come, someone is going to jail if there's any sort of injury or whatever have you, or someone is going to be asked to leave to keep the peace. And then all of a sudden, those two people that were confrontational and fighting each other, now their anger and aggression turns towards that officer, because how dare you take my man, or how dare you take my woman? And then now they're attacking the officer. So they will tell you that's one of the most horrific calls to go through, because anything could happen.
Okay, so wait a minute. I wasn't ready to hear that. So
Mhm.
when police are called to a home for an altercation, a domestic violence altercation, they're called. They didn't just drive by and, go not,
Mhm.
they were called. They were called for a reason. They were called to calm things down so nobody would get hurt. So
Right.
are you saying that the police themselves can do the arrest? The person who called for help doesn't have to be the one that says, yes, I want this person arrested?
Correct.
Ah.
Correct.
So there might be times when a person calls and doesn't want the other person taken away. They just call to calm things down so
To
nobody
calm.
gets hurt.
Right, right. I believe it's ever since OJ that someone must go to jail. Something must happen. Yeah, after OJ. So someone is going to go to jail because they need to keep the peace. And like I said, that's often the most dangerous part, because now oftentimes one or two
Mm.
turn their anger towards the officer, and it could get pretty
Oh my God.
horrific.
Oh, geez. I can't imagine. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I would like to talk about the dreaded D word from
Mhm.
your position as a psychologist.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to work with people going through divorce?
Um, as not as a psychologist, but as a coach. Because
Oh, okay.
as a psychologist, I work with individuals who are seriously mentally ill. But as a coach, I work with individuals who might be struggling in their relationships and the divorce has come up, or they're just trying to figure out how they can maybe not go through divorce.
So how do you deal with that then, as a coach when it comes up? Well, as a coach, you're only dealing with one person, right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes I have couples contact me, and how I do it in my practices, say, for example, a couple contacts me, I start to work with the couple first. I'll have a couple sessions with them together. And then at that point, then I'll do individuals. So then I'll talk to the maybe the female for a session or two, and then I'll talk to the male for a session too, and then I bring them back together for the last few sessions. Because oftentimes we find that once that person is isolated, the truth comes out,
Without a
in
doubt.
front, in front of each other. They're both on their best
Very reserved.
behavior. And no one wants to really get to the bottom. They're very vague. And then when you get them alone, and then, okay, well, this is what's really going on, or this is what really is bothering me. Um, and then we have those conversations, and I try to be what you refer to as like a mediator. Okay, so this is what's
Right.
coming up with this person, and let's talk about this, and so on and so forth.
When I got my first mediation training, it was at the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office in a program called the Dispute Resolution Program.
Hmm.
And it was a wonderful program. I learned so much doing that. And you had to do 160 hours of work. It was a county-wide program free of charge. And
Oh,
you mediated disputes. So it was a whole range of things. It was the
yeah.
best training ever. But the whole point of that type of training, it was called the transformational style of mediation. You didn't let the parties separate. Everybody had to stay in the same room. And I said, well, that's quite a challenge, but okay, I did it the way they wanted me to do it. And I kept doing it that way until I realized what you just said. I had to separate a couple because one person actually asked for it once I got
Mm.
into private practice. And my suite allows for 2 rooms. So
Okay.
I can separate people. I realized how beneficial that is because of what you said.
Mhm.
The real story comes out. They're reluctant to say it. They don't really want to go into all that depth in front of the other person and make a whole scene. Let's just try
Mhm.
and get through this as easy as we can.
Right.
But really, when the whole story comes out, solutions are more obvious.
Correct.
that are beneficial to the couple, right?
Correct. Exactly. Exactly. I think you end up getting to the root of the cause. You see the transparency, and yeah, you're able to finally navigate some sort of resolution or solution, whether we still go through the divorce or whether we decide to work together. At the end of the day, we find out what the true problem is, and then we can really have a conversation instead of talking about these superficial things that are not going to change anything. You need to get to the root of the problem. And the only way I find that you could do that is to separate them. Because like you said, in the same room, it just doesn't come up.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And I've done my best work when I've separated people, when they really explain what they didn't say, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, creative problem solving can take place to
Yeah.
your benefit. And then
Yeah.
we really roll up our sleeves, we get working, and generally we find a solution.
Yeah, and also too, the other part is like you really get to see the emotions. You may have had like someone who comes in and they present as very rigid and tough on the outside and they won't back down. But then you get them alone and you could just see that wall just falling apart. And then you start to get the other emotions, sadness, you get tears, like I really want this to work. I really love them. But in front of them, they have to present themselves or they perceive they have to present themselves
Yeah.
a certain way. And then you can like, okay, I can work with this, but I can't work with the angry hostility. I can't work with that. You know what I mean? Put you on the timeout.
The timeouts have to be, yes, they're frequent. So, and to all of you listening, if you're going into a mediation, if you're involved in a series of mediations, ask for a separation. And make sure the mediator that you choose will allow you to do that, because there are some mediators that really, there's this one gentleman who's extreme. He doesn't believe the mediator should speak at all. I'm like, but
Oh,
then why are they hiring you?
right.
If you're just going to sit there and bear witness, they need communication help,
Yes.
or they wouldn't be there. They could do this at the kitchen table, for heaven's sakes,
For free.
for free. So make sure when you interview your mediator, make sure you ask if you want to be separated. Because I tell my clients, you can tell me when you want to be separated. I will know when the time is. I always know when it's time to separate them. But
Right.
maybe you want to ask for it. So everybody listening, please know you should always have that option, and make sure the mediator you choose will do that for you. And if
Absolutely.
they say, nope, nope, everybody's in the same room, then that's not the right mediator for you. If that's not what you want, that's
Absolutely.
not what you want.
Mm-hmm.
The dreaded D word. Yes, it
Mm-hmm.
is the dreaded D word. Being asked for the divorce, if you don't know it's coming, even though you may know your relationship needs help. But if you're not ready to hear that question or that statement, I'd like a divorce, it can be the most earth-shattering thing you could ever hear.
Right.
What should people do if they do end up hearing it and they're shattered?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because in that moment, you feel betrayed. Um, you feel that probably like the earth is just falling, apart before you, and everything that you think you've worked so hard for, this home, this children, all these things that we've worked together, now you realize that it's going to be gone, or you won't have access to it, or whatever have you. Um, First, I want you to take a deep breath. That's the first thing I want you to do, because that's something that's really hard to hear. And your response is going to be one of, a heightened emotion, whether it's what, or anger, or something like that. Take a deep breath. Then ask them to repeat themselves, because you want to make sure you heard them correctly. And then you want to go into, why are you asking for a divorce? And truly hear them out before you say anything. And if you are not ready to respond in that moment, because you don't have to,
True.
you know what? Let me process this, because they've had time to process this. They've been thinking about this for however long that they have. You just gave me this information, so I need you to allow me time to process it. So thank you for sharing this with me. Maybe you're sorry to hear that your spouse feels this way, but I need to step away right now because I need a moment. And then when you're ready, go back and have that conversation. If you feel that you want to fight for your marriage, then you start having that conversation and hopefully your partner is on board. If not, then you start talking about the ways that we can make this amicable. Okay. What are we going to do with the home? What are you thinking about the kids if there are children involved? You know, any other finances or whatever have you. My best advice is try to get those things worked out before you go to court, because if not, the judge will help you and you may not like the help. So if you could at all, have these conversations and have everything ironed out before you get to court, I'm telling you, it would give you peace of mind.
Dr. Billoups, what you said about take a deep breath, as shocked as you may be, I mean, people can faint. I mean, it could be, and you can know the relationship, the marriage isn't good. You can know it has problems, but to hear those words, I want a divorce, your life just changed before your eyes
Yeah.
without you being a willing participant in the
Right.
decision, right?
Right.
So all control is being taken away from you. But what you said was so prescient, though, because just take a deep breath. Don't start screaming and yelling. Don't start getting angry. Just take a deep breath. And I love that you said, I have to process this. I can't even engage in a conversation right now. Okay, well, how long do you need? How long do you think you need? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I will process, and obviously we do have to talk about it.
Right. Absolutely. Because when I do come back to you, I want to make sure that I have a clear head. I want to make sure that I'm in a space where, okay, this person has told me they want a divorce. I don't want my emotions to get the best of me, because if I'm still upset or whatever, and it's upsetting, nothing is resolved when you have two heated parties.
Right.
So we both want to have this conversation with a level head and both be allowed to have time to process it. Is only fair to both parties.
When we were talking right before we started recording, you said something very optimistic about how to use divorce going forward in a positive way. How do you deal with that as a coach? Okay, the decision is made. Now, how do we make this work for you?
Right. Right. So when you have individuals who have decided that, okay, there's nothing else that can be done, let's go through the divorce. I often start off with, what have you done to salvage the marriage? Because we want to make sure that you've done everything you can to make this relationship work. If you're like Dr. Billups, we've gone to coaching, we've gone to therapy, it's just not working out, we've grown apart, we're certain this is what we want. Okay, then let's start. So what is it that you want out of this? Are we going to remain friends? Are there children involved? There's a bunch of questions that I need to ask up front. And not necessarily about the finances, because that has nothing to do with me. But should it come up and they need help with that, I will be more than happy to give them guidance. And I'll take a scenario where there are children involved. I want to know, have you spoken to your children? What are their thoughts on this? Again, like we were saying earlier, you don't have to give a lot of details depending on the age of the child, but are the children aware? And how disrupted would their lives be? And then I just keep letting them know, regardless, the children you need to think about the children, you need to think about the children. You can still have the divorce and it can still be amicable and you can still be great co-parents and you can still love each other and all these things. But there's going to be work involved. There's communication has to be at the forefront. You have to learn to be pleasant and respectful to the other party. And then I'm gonna go back to communication. Got to keep that line of communication open.
Yeah, and I think underneath all of these wonderful things that you just said is you have evolved now to a different place. So no, you're not interlocked as husband and wife. You're in a different position. If you have children, you're co-parents.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a kind of like a parallel position. You're going to be speaking differently to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess have to get used to that different energy, that different vibe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's a whole different dynamic, you know. And then all of a sudden, the other thing that comes in, which I always say, wait 6 months to a year, is now you guys are ready to date. And then the conversation of, oh, I want to introduce my child to the new partner. Hold on. Let's get through this part first, because the person that you were at the beginning of that marriage, the middle of the marriage, and now you're divorced are all different. So you need to allow yourself some time to figure out who you are now that you are this single person, you're the single parent. Figure out who you are before you move forward. Take some time for yourself. Take some time to relearn yourself. Take some time for some self-preservation, some self-care, because I don't care if the divorce is amicable, it's still very traumatic. So
Absolutely.
take some time to, take care of yourself before you proceed.
Right. And to remember that your child is getting used to the divorce. Now you're going to bring another stranger into this person's life. They
Mm-hmm.
have to get used to this other person when they're still trying to compartmentalize and deal with two homes,
Yeah.
two sets of clothes,
Yeah. Yeah.
how does this all work out? And now we have new people. You can date, but you don't have to bring them home to your kids, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to date. Again, I always say wait at least 6 months to a year, longer if you can, but you don't have to introduce your child to everyone that you have in your life. Be creative. I wouldn't even allow them into my home, whether or not my children are there, because that's our space until you figure out if this is something you want to
Mhm.
be serious about.
Yeah.
But meet at a coffee shop, go to a restaurant, meet at a park, whatever have you, but keep that space sacred for you and your children, because again, they've already been through enough, and they don't need another layer of trauma
Right.
in case that relationship doesn't work out. So allow yourself some time.
Yes, allow yourself some time to learn yourself again because you are a changed person after the
Mhm.
divorce. And
Absolutely.
and that's okay. You're supposed to be a changed person. Everything we go through in life makes some type of adjustment, and that's how we
Absolutely.
grow.
Right.
I think it's kind of interesting, though, when you go through a very conservative approach to dating and you don't bring anybody home until it's a long-term committed relationship and you've squared away everything with the divorce and the kids are doing fine. Do you find that the kids then get curious on their own who mommy and daddy are seeing, and they'll kind of let you know that they're ready to meet them? Does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. They will get curious, because I think that children, um, they want mom and dad to be happy. They want to see the smiles on your face. And if those smiles, along with you, of course, when you see your children, they bring you smiles. But if another adult brings your a smile to your face, they want to see that. They want the joy in the household. And so yeah, they will definitely let you know when they're ready, and they'll definitely let you know when they're not ready. Because you could bring someone home and they're like, that's not my dad, or that's not my mom. You know what I mean? And right away they're like, no, 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 I wasn't saying that. I'm just someone I'm dating or interested or whatever have you. They will definitely let you know what they're feeling. And,
Yeah.
I know parents are like, well, this is none of your business, but it is their business. This is their home too. And they have a right to understand what's going on, with you, because their safety could be at risk. All these other things come into play. So, just
Right.
just be gentle with your children.
And this is where you let your guard down at home. You can be
Mhm.
who you are at home, sad, happy, scared, whatever.
Right.
When you introduce a new person into this, the kids potentially can't be who they are. They have to
Correct.
change who they are. And wow, I always, I didn't come from a divorced family, although there were times. No, but I didn't. And so I wonder now, as somebody working in family law, what would I feel like if some new adult came into my home, depending on what, I don't even know if it matters what age. How would I be? And so I ask people, how were you ever divorced? And what were you like as a kid if your
Yeah.
parent brought somebody new into your life? What was that like for you?
Yeah.
It's different with different people. It's different.
Yeah, it is. It is really different. When because this is my second marriage, so at some point I had to introduce my current husband to my daughters, and I don't recall how old they were, but they were probably around maybe 7 and 9. And I think we dated a year and a half before I decided to introduce them. And they were a bit taken aback because they really hadn't seen me with anyone since, their father. And so I had to allow for that, like, okay, well, this is so and so. And it was so funny because um, I introduced him as Mr. Billoups. And, to this day, we've been together, I don't know, 17 years. My girls still call him Mr. Billups.
Are you serious? That's so funny.
They do. They do. Because I
That's
was like, this
adorable.
is Mr. Billups. And so, yeah, I had to just,
Adorable.
like I said, allow them to process this, that mom is moving forward and she's dating. And I needed to hear, their opinions about what they thought of him and if they felt safe with him. And, you have to consider that.
Absolutely. Because even though they're not getting divorced, they are in the divorce.
Hmm.
Like it or not, they are part of the divorce. And
Yeah,
who was I interviewing the other day? Kids are people too. They have
absolutely.
feelings. You have to listen to them. You
You
can't
have
just,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was delightful. Thank you so much for joining us. This was
Thank
great.
you.
This,
Thank you for having me. I could talk to you all day long.
well, let's just do that since we both live in Los Angeles. Thank you. Now, listen, we're going to have show notes and ways people can contact you. But for those who just like to jot something down while they're listening, best point of contact.
Phone, easiest. 424-287-7410. You can contact me, leave a message, send a text. If you're feeling frisky and you write really fast, then you can email me at dr.billups, B as in boy, ILLOU, P as in Paul, S as in Sam, at cultivatingyourlife.com. So that's my email.
And I'm just going to give your phone number one more time. It's 424-287-7410.
Correct.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Good, 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 and good. And thank all of you for listening. I always do. Please introduce this podcast to your friends. Please subscribe. We have the best guests with the greatest information. I'm partial, but I do believe it's true. I do. You can contact me with any show ideas that you may have through this website, Judith at theamicableddivorceexpert.com. It will come right to my email inbox. And as always, have an amicable day.